fashion than we normally do. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, April 20th, 2020 to order. Trace, would you just go through and make sure all Board of Selectmen members are on? Selectman Federici, are you on?
Here.
Selectman Haverda.
Here.
Selectwoman Renner.
Yes, here.
Selectwoman Ruoff. Selectwoman Ruoff, are you here? You're muted. Please unmute. Tracy, unmute Sandy, please. You're unmuted. Sandy, you're unmuted.
Okay, thanks.
All right, you're here. All right, our first order of business, Charles, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
which stands
one nation under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charlie. Some things we can continue to do, right?
Yes.
Second item of business, public forum, limited to 3 minutes on any agenda items. Is there anyone wishing to address the board in public forum? Trace, what is the procedure for folks to identify themselves as wanting to speak? Tracy, you're muted.
They have to raise their hand. There's a way for them to do that if they hit the more button. Nobody wishes to speak?
Well, Jeff Hocking has raised his hand physically, so
Okay,
would you unmute Jeff, please?
sure.
Jeff, you're unmuted.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Jeffrey Hocking. I'm a lifelong resident of Guilford and a 32-year veteran of the Guilford Police Department in 2012. I'm speaking on my behalf and also many other pensioners, some who were able to attend this virtual meeting and many that were not. We are here requesting a COLA to our pension, something that has not been granted since 2008, 12 long years ago. We are not just names on a spreadsheet or numbers in an actuarial algorithm. We are mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, husbands, and wives. Most of us have dedicated the majority of our adult life to the town of Guilford Police Department. We were on the front line, donned a bulletproof vest daily to protect the citizens of our great town. We worked nights, weekends, and holidays, not a 9 to 5 like most people. When the storms, disasters, crimes, and other tragedies occurred, most citizens were safely home with their family while we left our families behind to protect and serve. We all served with pride and were always told that our personal sacrifices would not be forgotten. Going 12 years without a penny of a COLA has left us feeling slighted, disappointed, and frankly abandoned. If the active employees of the town of Guilford were not given a raise for 12 years, I can guarantee you there would be an uprising. We have experienced the same increases in expenses over the past 12 years as all of them and all of you. We're just asking for what we were promised over the years. We strongly believe that the consideration of the COLA should be for our group only, as outlined in the police bargaining agreement. Instead of considering this for just our group of pensioners, the town has added 7 other bargaining units. Why is this not a level playing field? Here's why. Police contribute 8% of their pay. The 4 town employee bargaining units contribute between 3 and 3.75% of their pay, and the school unit contributes nothing. Comments of the pension board chairman last Wednesday were that addressing a COLA for just one union would be unfair. I would suggest that looking at the financial impact for 5 unions, not just one, as negotiated and outlined in the police contract is what is unfair. Comparing employees contributing 8% of their pay to employees contributing less than half of that, and in one instance paying nothing, is unfair. I would ask for myself and my fellow pensioners that you grant us one of the 2 Millman COLA recommendations. We are sensitive to the present financial situation, but understand that the market will rebound to pre-COVID-19 levels. If needed, consider delaying the COLA award for 6 to 9 months, but please don't forget the men and women who have risked their lives for the citizens of the town of Guilford. Sincerely, Jeffrey Hocking. And this letter was read and approved by the following pensioners: Sandra Brooks, Robert Norman, Patrick Leary, Daniel Leary, Thomas Terabile, William Maizano, Robert Robinson, Stephen Renchi, Jeffrey Reika, Linda Bouchard, Jackie Cipollini, Mike Dennison, Larry Ruggiero, Henry Lingren, Victor Dufilli, John Dunn, Robert Dubé, Edward Bowen, Al Magris, Bruce Dennison, Donald Thompson, Rick Moore, Eric Robinson, Doug Jowett, and Charles Korn. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else wishing to address the board in public forum? Tracy, has anyone else raised their hand electronically?
I've not seen anything, no.
Okay. Well, hearing none, let's move on to item 3, and that's to approve the minutes. 3.1 would be the April 6, 2020 regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved. Renner.
Second.
Any comments, questions, additions, changes, etc.? Hearing none, call the question on the adoption. Selectman Federici.
Aye.
Selectman Haverda.
He's muted.
He's muted. Trace, can you unmute him permanently, please?
Yep,
He raised his hand too.
yep, he did.
Okay,
Charlie?
I'm
Oh, all right, you're open, Charles.
okay. I'm an aye now. I'm unmuted.
Thank you.
How do I get rid of my little hand now?
Well, we'll wave back to you. How's that?
Okay.
Selectwoman Renner,
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Item 4, Finance Director, Mary Jane Malavasi. 4.1, receive monthly report from the Finance Director. Mary Jane, what would you like to bring to our attention?
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to start with revenues. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that our revenues are down slightly from where we were this time last year. I would like to report, however, that I listened live to the Bond Commission meeting last week, and we will be receiving, hopefully very soon, the $426,000 that has been held up by that commission this year. Once we bring that in, we will be over 99% collected for the current year, leaving us about $300,000 to bring in for the rest of the year to cover 100% of our budgeted revenues. Although some of the line items such as the building department, the ambulance, the town clerk, and park and rec are not bringing in their revenues as normal at this time because of current circumstances, I feel pretty confident that over the next 3 months, we should be able to at least bring us up to the 100%, if not slightly over. Are there any questions?
Mary Jane, this is Matt. The remaining balance from the Board of Education of $715,000 coming from the state. You mentioned the Bond Commission, which was on the other departmental. Is there any expectation that we will not receive the full Board of Education allotment?
I have not heard anything regarding that. I would expect it to come in at this point.
And realizing that, would that put us over the 100% threshold regardless?
Without that, even without that, yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Okay.
With bringing in 300,000 more at this point.
Good. Any other questions on revenues?
No.
Expenses.
Similar story on expenses. We are down slightly from last year, although all of our departments are working almost to capacity, some rhyme or reason. Your board has been looking closely at large capital expenses, so I would expect that you would continue to do so. Otherwise, most of our departments are kind of moving along as is.
Okay. Thank you. Any specific questions on expenses? Moving on. Mary Jane?
Okay. The last thing I have is the medical benefits account. You can see that for the month of March, we couldn't get much closer to exactly where we project each month. That brings us in line. We have been a little bit lower than budgeted up till now. I would expect that to continue. This is the time of year where the town starts to kick in a little bit more for anyone who's on the HSA. So we'll see how that goes. As far as catastrophic claims, we're only at 43% at this point. Last year we were at 70% where we are right now, but we do have a few months left, so we'll be tracking that as well.
Good. And the projection for surplus for this fiscal year is 1.25 million at this point? Yes. Which would bring the total estimated fund balance of over $5 million in that account, correct? Correct. While we've been very fortunate that we have not had any employees, town employees, test positive for the COVID virus, Mitch, could you just briefly let the folks here know what the policies have been adopted relative to covered expenses with COVID-19?
Thanks, Matt. Mitch Goldblatt, Director of Human Resources. At this point, as you've mentioned, we don't have anyone who has tested positive. However, we have had several people who have had scares. In that case, they have worked with their own physician and also with Dennis Johnson, our health director, and we have had several people who have stayed out of the office and have not and have been self-quarantined for the 14 days. In such cases, people have been using their sick leave. We also have the new emergency paid sick leave that was passed by Congress that is invoked, and anyone who is out with a positive test or has or needs to quarantine to take care of a family member, there's 10 working days of paid sick leave for that. We have one person taking care of family members right now under that situation. Anyone who is run out of sick leave, we have adopted also a policy that allows them to borrow ahead for next year's sick bank in such case. And we've had one person who's reached that situation. So, overall, we're working with everybody closely. I've been in contact with a number of people each time we've had any kind of situation or any potential situation to work with them with their personal accruals, working with their supervisor, as well as with Dennis and yourself.
Thanks, Mitch. Just a quick recap. The waiver of the patient portion of any expenses related to COVID.
Yes, the town has been proactive in that, in waiving first the testing costs of anyone who needs to be tested for COVID. Of course, they do have to have a doctor's permission to do so. And we were ahead of the game on that. It became mandatory shortly thereafter anyway. And then we've also been asked to look at covering as a town the treatment of anyone who tests positive for COVID. We have also decided as a community to take care of those costs for anyone who does test positive. The treatment will be covered through the town, not to be charged to anyone's cost sharing or even against their health savings account. As I said, thus far, we'll knock on wood, we haven't had anybody in that situation. We are prepared, though, to cover those expenses if necessary. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Mitch. And we don't anticipate, at this point, with no positive cases, we don't anticipate much of an impact on the projected surplus for this fiscal year.
Not at this point, no.
Good. Any other questions of Mary Jane before we move on? Hearing none. Item 5, Board of Ed Director of Facilities Operations, Cliff Gurnham. I see Cliff's on the on my screen anyway. 5.1, discuss and take possible action on the award of the Guilford High School Stadium track and field design. Cliff, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So we went out and solicited proposals for the design of both the track and field at the high school. We're talking about the stadium field. We did get 4 proposals. We actually solicited more. We got 4 proposals. The Standing Building Committee, the Standing Fields Committee, and Park and Rec reviewed these proposals. And after reviewing them, the Standing Building Committee, the Standing Fields Committee actually did a scope review with the lowest bidder, which was Castle Booz Associates. Castle Booz was the firm that did the upper field when it was redone the second time. The town had very good experience with them. They did a great job. They worked well with the town. So the Standing Building Committee and the Standing Fields Committee, as well as Park and Rec, made the recommendation to move forward and award the work to Castle Booz Associates in the amount of $17,500.
Good. Cliff, just give us a little more background. You know, there'll be some folks who will be saying, why are we spending money on something like this, given the uncertain times that we're living in? Can you talk a little bit about the age and condition of the field and the track?
Sure. So the track and field, the field itself is over 13 years old. It's starting to wear out, especially where the normal play is, such as the center of the field. The actual turf itself is getting worn out. The normal life expectancy is about 7-8 years on the older turf fields. I believe it's longer with the newer turf fields. So we've well exceeded the life expectancy of the field itself. Park and Rec has done a great job maintaining it. They do regular maintenance on it, both in-house as well as bringing in outside firms to make sure that the field is properly maintained. The track itself has been refinished, I believe, twice since it was originally installed. It has multiple cracks and seams, so it's seen its useful life expectancy. Our original goal was to get the field replaced this summer, but due to the time frame and everything that's happening, we felt it's in the best interest to push off the actual work for the year, but give us some time to do the engineering so that we make sure we get that done correctly and have everything in place, and we'll be able to give the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, the proper numbers, construction numbers for next year, so that we know what we need in our budget. That goes along with the Board of Education, because I know that the Board of Selectmen is working closely with the Board of Education on the replacement of this field, and that's obviously why I'm involved. So,
wonderful, thank you.
Cliff, this is Lou Federici. You touched on really one of my questions on this, which was, is it possible to separate this engineering work, which I gather is money from this year, right? This current budget that we're in, is that right?
No, it's coming from a bond authorization, to 2017, 2018 bond authorization.
Okay, so even the engineering work is coming out of a bond authorization. So, but the work itself can be pushed off, and this engineering work essentially won't go stale. If a decision has to be made middle of the year next year, and that would have some budget effect, this would be the kind of thing that could be delayed, the actual work.
The work itself can be delayed till the summer of 2021. I wouldn't recommend pushing it much past that, knowing the condition of that field. We're really getting to the end of its life cycle.
Right. Fair to say, though, at the moment, you know, at least this season and whatever use it would get during this summer, I mean, there's less use given the circumstances. So our delay is not as critical as it might be under some other circumstances.
Correct.
I'd also proffer, Lou, that this is only the design portion. We, once we get the design back, there would be a need to prepare bid documents. The likelihood of this happening anytime soon is pretty slim.
Yeah, I understand. Cliff did a nice job explaining that separation between this engineering work, design work, and the actual construction, which is really the more expensive piece anyway. So
Yeah.
thanks for that presentation.
We probably, our goal would be to go out to bid sometime in probably February or March of 2021. That would be our goal. So
This
that
is
we-
Sandy. Hi,
Go ahead.
this is Sandy Ruoff. The cost of the actual, the next part, the construction part, is that already covered in a bond or is that new money?
That would be new money.
Okay. And my second question is, you said it's 13 years old. Is it dangerous to use it now for activities, for the prescribed activities?
No, the field itself gets inspected every year and actually tested every year to ensure that it meets all the requirements that you can have regular play on it. So no, it's not dangerous. It's in good working order. It's just, it's really getting worn out. So again, if it was in that type of condition, we'd pull the field offline, and it's not at this time. We can easily get through the next year. They'll do tests again in the fall, make sure that everything is up to snuff before they release play on it. And I believe they do it again in the spring. So we check that to make sure that's safe to play on and meets all the requirements with all the testing and impact testing and that type of thing. So Park and Rec does that on a regular basis.
Thank you.
If I have just a quick question. The range in the bids is enormous. The second lowest bid is twice this amount and the top bid is 4 times. I know you mentioned that you did go through the specifications carefully with Kessel Booz. Is there any reason that the others were so high? Were there options? Or?
I think the primary reason is Castle Booz is very familiar, obviously, with Guilford and the facility itself, since they've just done a lot of work. You know, I think that's the primary, and I think they really want to continue working with Guilford. So they gave us a really great price to do this work.
Thank you.
She's so funny.
Any other questions?
Yes, Matt, I had a question.
Sure, Charles.
Before I have my question, you might want to suggest to everyone when they're not speaking to mute, so we're getting a little feedback in the background, but that's a separate issue. The question I have for Cliff is, it sounds like with the use of this field, we got by all of the initial drainage issues we had with it, and they have been sorted out. But with the new field, were some of the issues with the new field due to new types of material, or was that actually a construction issue too? And the follow-up to that question is going to be, are we using the new types of material in the new field potentially?
Cliff,
Or
let
is
me
that
take.
what the study is going to deal with?
Cliff, let me take that, please. Charles, we cannot comment on the nature of the failure at the newer field based on our mediation agreement. No, we cannot comment on that particular piece. So Cliff, if you want to answer the balance of it.
Yep. So in regards to what type of infill will be used on that, part of the proposal is to have the engineering firm give us a couple different options, and the standing fields and standing building committee will go through, review those options, review those with the Board of Ed as well, and determine what option best suits the nature of that field. So there are different options between the sand filled, the crumb rubber, the virgin crumb rubber, and others that will be investigated. But you know, we will get different options, and we'll determine what is will be used at that point in time, based upon the input of the different committees.
Okay.
Anything further? Hearing none, is there a motion to award the award the design phase of this project to Castle Blues Associates in the amount of $17,500? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. Renner speaking.
And a second?
I'll second. This is Lou.
Thank you. Call the question. In favor, Selectman Federici,
Aye.
Selectman Haverda,
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner,
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff,
Aye.
Select Person Hoy is also an aye. Motion carries. Thank you. 5.2, discuss and take possible action to waive the bidding and award repairs to the 1936 addition windows at Adams Middle School to Millennium Builders through the Gordian Group EZIQC state program. Cliff?
Thank you again. So just to give you some background, 2009, the windows at Adams were replaced. We used a engineering architectural firm called Fletcher Thomas. They are no longer in business. We have been working with Jeff D'Onofrio to try to find a way to get reimbursement due to the failure of these windows, but since it's really past 10 years, we haven't had much success, and Jeff has kind of recommended that we just move forward, even though he'll try to push further to try to get some sort of reimbursement, but I don't see it coming. So essentially these windows, and I think everyone's familiar with Adams, they have a double hung window, which is very, very large, and they're very heavy. And the balances that control how fast the upper sash and lower sash move failed on many of the windows. So if you unlatch the window, you may have the top or bottom drop or move unexpectedly, which creates a extreme safety concern. We've essentially taken the windows out of operation, and some have been screwed shut and others have or pinned shut. We've made the general policy that none of the windows are open or closed or used, especially by students. Now that they have air conditioning in each room, it's not as critical to open the windows. However, that is their natural ventilation, so they do need to have the windows operating and operable. So we moved forward. I went and got a proposal from Millennium Builders. And again, we're going through the Gordian Group / EZIQ state bid. So it's already been state bid approved, I guess you could say. That's why we're looking for the waiver. The Standing Building Committee looked and reviewed the proposal from Millennium Builders, and they made the recommendation to move forward with the work in the amount of $53,113.86. Excuse me.
Thank you, Cliff. Questions?
Are these new windows or repairs on the existing windows?
So we're going to essentially take the existing window apart and put new balancers in there that are stronger and heavier duty, so it will control the descent and operation of the windows. So we're not replacing the windows themselves, just the balances, but we do technically have to take the whole window apart to put those in. So there's quite a bit of work.
And how many windows are we talking about?
Bear with me 1 second. I should know that off the top of my head. I believe there are 123 balances that are going in there. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, 120 balancers.
Yeah, divide
Okay,
that
so
by
that's
2,
50
essentially. 2 per
Okay,
window.
50, okay. All right.
So,
That's all I have.
Anyone else? Hearing none, is there a motion to award the repairs to the 1936 addition windows at Adams Middle School to Millennium Builders through the Gordian Group EZIQC state program in the amount of 53, whatever, Cliff, 53,000, what was the final number?
$113.86.
Is there a motion for that?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. And yeah, I'm just going to point out, well, I'll wait till I get a second.
Yes. A second?
Second,
Any comments or questions, Lou?
So this strikes me as another, I mean, we're really giving everything close scrutiny. This strikes me as another item that feels like it could potentially be pushed off, but it's being funded through an existing bond referendum with an appropriate or sufficient balance. And if it's a situation we're doing work now, maintains the integrity of the windows. It sounds like if they're having a hard time, if I'm understanding what Cliff's saying, it sounds like the balancers are not functioning properly and the windows either aren't staying up or not closing properly. It sounds like there's some existing benefit to getting it done. And since it's essentially not new money, it's I guess a close call, but I'm obviously in favor of it. I did move it, so I do support it, given that it's coming from bonding.
Thank you, Lou.
I understand where Lou's coming from with taking a look at the spending, but again, it is money that has been bonded already. The question is this something that's planned for this summer?
We would start the work as soon as possible. So if this is actually awarded, we'd look at bringing in the crews now while the schools are empty, and start taking advantage of the downtime so we can get more done over the summer.
Okay, so this is the type of construction that could take place during this pandemic.
Yes.
And availability of parts is under control and all of those kinds of things?
There is a lead time to get the parts, I believe, about 2 to 3 weeks. Again, that's why we're trying to get it approved now so that we can get moving as soon as we can get the materials on hand.
Okay, that's all I have. I'm ready to vote.
I'd also point out that it is a safety issue. So all the more reason to go ahead with it.
Well, safety and fresh air.
Both are vital. All right.
That's true, especially now.
Exactly. All right. No more. If there are no more questions, call the question on the motion. Selectman Federici.
Aye.
Selectman Haverda.
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner.
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff.
aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Item 6, Environmental Planner Kevin McGee, 6.1. Consider and take possible action on contractor for tree removal of dead and/or hazardous trees on County Road between Long Hill and West Street. Kevin.
Morning, board. This is Kevin McGee, environmental planner. Requesting from the board permission to hire A&L tree experts to remove about 25 trees which are dead or hazardous located on County Road between Long Hill Road and West Street. The cost from A&L is $8,640. The price of the quotes range from the $8,640 to $13,525. So I'm recommending A&L. They're a contractor I've been using before, and they good work.
Kevin, and the balance of the board, this area of town is an area where I probably received the most number of calls and complaints during storms. That area seems to be very prone to outages and extended outages. Over the past year, Kevin has worked closely with Eversource. Eversource has contributed a significant amount to alleviating some of the concerns and some of not some concerns, but also tree work in this particular area. Kevin, you want to comment a little bit on that, please?
Yeah, over basically beginning of January, Eversource came in this same section of road. They removed about 20 trees close to the power lines on their end. And these are trees which are on the opposite side of the road, which the Eversource couldn't handle. So this one section of road, probably a mile long maybe, we're taking about a total of 40 trees between myself and Eversource removing. They also did a lot of work up on north end of West Street as part of their regular maintenance work, the ETT work they have. So they took a huge number of trees out with that work. And I just got a proposal or a request from them for removal of additional trees on the Podunk Road, no, excuse me, Peddlers Road and Moose Hill Road area there, which I'll be looking at for them the next coming week or so. So Eversource is doing work with power, with tree removal, but if it's on the opposite side of the road, the town needs to take our responsibility and take care of those.
Good. Questions of Kevin?
Now, it appears that, this is Charles Haverda. It appears that the trees have been marked, so the neighbors know that this is going to potentially happen.
Correct. Those trees have been marked with, since they're pretty much, since they're dead, they have been marked with white X's and green ribbons.
Okay. And no feedback, everybody's okay, we're not gonna.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
a lot
they
of
see
trees
me
there.
driving up and down the road there, marking them and stuff there. I don't think anybody's gonna complain about a dead tree coming down. Like as Matt said, we began the calls of dead trees dropping on their wires, and they're losing power for a day or so. So they're
Okay, good. All of these trees are dead, huh?
yeah, there's a
Ladies,
lot of
I-
dead stuff out there.
Yeah.
A lot of dead.
Okay, all right. I'm ready to vote.
That means, Charles, I think you're going to make the motion that we award it to A&L Tree Experts to remove 25 dead or hazardous trees on County Road along Hill, Equestrian.
Yeah,
for $8,600.
I do have another question, just if Kevin would like to speak to the funding of this, are we still okay in the tree fund?
I believe we're still okay. We'll have to take a look at my next statement coming in. There's been a lot going on in the past month, but
Mary Jane, can you unmute? Trace, would you unmute Mary Jane? You should be able to do it by yourself, Mary Jane. No? There you go.
No, I got a message that the host had to unmute me, so.
Okay.
So I guess my question of Kevin was whether or not this was utilizing a current purchase order with A&L, or would this be a new one?
This would be a specific purchase order for this one job here for the $8,640. We'll send you a new purchase order for that job.
Do you have any purchase orders that we won't be using? It's going to put you over in the line. That's the only reason I'm asking.
I'll have to look at them, but most of these purchase orders are going to be utilized. It's, as we indicated, there's a lot of dead stuff out there, which is creating issues along our roads. And they need to, if I know them, they have to be taken care of before we end up with a bigger issue.
Yeah, I'm not disputing the need. I'm just making sure the board is aware of the line item.
What kind of numbers are we talking about, Jane, as far as overage?
We would be over, not too much, probably about $6,000.
Not too much. I mean, that's almost
Well-
equal to.
Mary Jane, excuse me, I'm looking at the expenses that you forwarded as part of this meeting. He's got $20,000 in encumbrances in the tree maintenance and removal account. Is that?
That was my question, whether or not we were utilizing a part of that, but the answer was no. So right now I only have $2,000 left in that line.
You only have 2,000 left in tree maintenance and
In
removal?
tree maintenance and removal.
I'm showing 8170 as of the report you just forwarded. You have updated since then, since this report was generated?
The one advantage to having this meeting in my office is that I'm looking right at my screen. I might do this from now on. So that's the only reason I was asking, because that does put us
Gotcha.
about $6,000 over in that particular line item.
Is there a
Assuming
poss-
all the other purchase orders are used.
Correct, correct, because those are blanket purchase orders that we issued earlier in the year, so some of that could be canceled.
Yes, I'll go through them, but I pretty much, two of them are main contractors I've been using, A&L and Bartlett.
Right. Well, as we all know, Kevin always asks for more money than we give him for tree removal. And I think the current budget, we did the same thing to him again. So, but he usually figures a way to stay within his overall budget.
Kevin, can you go to either A&L or Bartlett or whoever you normally use and see if they can handle all of the remaining purchase orders, all the trees that you need taken care of for the amount left in the budget?
I usually get pricing from them. instead of doing hourly rates, because they get a better job from them with contractors. Hourly rates with a contractor, if they seem to be slowing down towards the end of the day or slow week, they may slow down how they're doing the work. So it's best having basically a quote from them before they conduct work for me.
Yeah, is there some reason you can't go to them and say, here's the work that needs to be done, here's what we have in the budget, do you want to do it?
I just keep on doing lists and I send them out, so they'll get the pricing as competitive like this is here for any upcoming work.
Any further questions? Do we have a motion to approve at this point? Charles, I think
I'll move it, and I think we've sent the message fairly clearly to Kevin that if there is any way to cut either this and/or future disorders, he knows where we're coming from. So I'll move this at this point in time.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh,
Yep. Got it. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, call the question. Selectman Federici.
aye.
Selectman Haverda.
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner.
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff.
Aye. Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Have a good day. Item 7, Director of Human Resources, Mitch Goldblatt. 7.1, consider and take possible action on the revised donated sick leave policy. As I think you may recall, at our last meeting, we had a discussion about rather than bringing every request on donated sick leave to the board to authorize, we would modify the policy to authorize the first selectman to do so if the request met all the criteria in the current policy. Mitch, you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Sure. The change you have before you has two basic changes to it. One is the one that Matt just described that would give him the authority to make this decision administratively rather than bringing it to you legislatively. But he does have the authority and the ability to also tap into information from either the department head or the Board of Selectmen if he feels that it is necessary to do so or warrants the case to do so. The other change was another one that came up from a previous time period where we had a newer employee, unlike the employees who have a lot of sick leave and have used it up for one reason or another. We also have employees that don't have sick leave or have very little sick leave because they are brand new. And so I have also made the change in the beginning and letter B, that they don't have to be employed for 12 months to be eligible for this. So those are the two major changes. The rest just is grammatical and looking for your discussion or comments and obviously a vote.
Any comments, questions?
I would just say this seems to be fixes that came up in response to some of our recent meetings on this subject. Is that right, Mitch? That directly?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt the revised donated sick leave policy as detailed in the document you have in front of you?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Call the question. Selectman Federici.
Aye.
Selectman Haverda.
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner.
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff.
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Motion carries. 7.2, consider an act on a recommendation of the Pension Committee regarding a cost of living adjustment COLA for current pensioners. Mitch?
Yep. Mitch Goldblatt, Director of Human Resources. As you heard in the public forum from Pensioner Officer Jeff Hocking, it is the police retirement plan that does dictate that you look at this every 2 years, actually through the police contract, that the Board of Selectmen, I'll read part of the police contracts, is retirement board, which is our pension committee, shall cause a study to be made by the plan actuary and prepare a report to the first selectman for submission to the Board of Selectmen every 2 years. And so that's where we're at. This is our 2-year cycle. Pensioner Hawking had requested just looking at the police plan, which is the only one you're required to look at. Yet when we've had Millennium, our actuary, look at these plans, we've always had them do a complete study of all the pension plans and the total impact that it would take place. Millennium did prepare a report. It was addressed last Wednesday, by the pension committee. And the pension committee looked at the report and the financial impact and determined unanimously not to recommend a COLA for pension distribution at this time. I'll read you just a bit of the draft minutes. It says, with the potential impacts identified by Finance Director Mary Jane Malavasi, Mr. Bauer, that's Ray Bauer, the chairman, stated he does not feel it appropriate to recommend a COLA at this time. Both committee members, Copps and Golitz, agreed. And eventually, after more discussion, the board voted not to recommend a COLA be granted to retirees at this time to the Board of Selectmen. And you have the report that was generated by Millennium at our request, which Jen Castellano has signed and submitted, and she was present via Zoom at the pension committee answering questions at that time. So this is before you for just endorsement of the pension committee's recommendation or other action. It's your call.
Mitch, just briefly, I want to, on the back 2 pages, there's an estimated impact of the COLAs, right?
Right.
If my math is correct, that the 4.2 and 2.3% adjustments respectively, all three three of the plans would total about $108,000 in increased annual contributions required by the town.
That is correct.
Okay. Would there be any contributions from the employees relative to that piece?
No, the employees would, unless there's a change to the present contracts, the employee contributions would remain the same. Any difference is always picked up by the town. There's different contribution levels for different groups. A lot of it has to do with how generous their benefit is, but that would not change, and nor do we require, obviously, any pensioners to contribute to their pension once they've retired. That's a benefit they receive at retirement.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any questions?
I have one. Is there a time frame during which we need to make this decision? Is there some kind of a deadline?
I'm not aware of an actual deadline, Sue. It does have to be looked at every 2 years, and this is our 2-year cycle. We're right in line where we should be for timing wise. We do it every 2 years. You looked at it 2 years ago and 2 years prior to that. So, that's where we're at.
Okay.
I think I the same question.
I'm sorry. Where I'm coming from is I don't feel knowledgeable enough about this. There's been some interesting points raised, and I'd like some more time to consider this. I don't know if I'm the only one.
Are there any questions that you have right now that I might be able to answer, or what you want me to go back and get for you?
I'm not sure if I even know enough to know what I'd like to ask, but
okay.
The concept that we're looking at numbers for all the bargaining units and we're only required to for one or for certain ones. What's the background of that, I guess?
The background of that, Sue, is basically the fact that in the police contract itself, and this has been a contract provision that's been there for many years. This is what triggers the 2-year cycle.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to, otherwise we wouldn't have to look at a COLA at all, or you can look at it as often as you wanted to, as often as 1 year, I'd say, each year. So the contract does require you look at it every 2 years. The tradition has been, even when COLAs were awarded, and the last one was awarded in 2008, it was awarded across the board to all the different bargaining units or all the pensioners, all the active pensioners. But it is split up. You can see the impact there by bargaining unit. If you were to choose to award a COLA for one unit and not the other for any reason, you can see the difference of the costs and what the impact would be. It is amortized over 19 years. So the cost that Matt was referring to, the approximate $108,000 for all of the units together. And as we mentioned in the beginning, the police wanted to look at this separately. So everyone's aware, the police impacted that $108,000 and $68,000 for the police pensioners. That's, as I say, amortized over a 19-year period.
Okay, so in this document, the column that says increase in 19-year amortization, that's the 108?
Yeah, if you add those numbers,
Okay.
it should come out approximately that. I'm trusting Matt's math on that. The
So we're looking,
68, the 16 for the school, and the total of 24,000 for the town.
okay. And can you tell me the reason? So we're being asked to consider and act on a recommendation from the pension committee. I'm interested in hearing their reasoning, I guess. Why did they not do this?
Their reason, as I read to you in the minutes, was basically the fact that they felt that did not feel it was appropriate to recommend at this time.
That's
I think it's basically a financial. I think it's really a financial decision on their case. I don't know if there was much more spoken about. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but it was unanimous. It was unanimous vote of the pension committee not to recommend the cost of living adjustment for pensioners at this time for any of the groups.
So their reason was the fact that they did not consider it appropriate. To me, that's not a reason. I'd be interested in hearing a little more than that. I guess for me, I'd like to know that.
Right. Having participated in the pension committee meeting, that was the first comment that was raised relative to it. They did not get to the substance of the efficacy or the fairness related to COLAs. They did not go to that particular side of the discussion. They were looking at it strictly from a financial standpoint, understanding fully well that they were looking at some financial documents that had been provided to them only hours before, or relative to our portfolio's performance in the current situation we're in. So they did not get to substantive discussions about the pros and cons of awarding COLAs. Is that fair, Mitch?
Yep, that's a fair. I think it's a fair statement.
So it sounds like, and I think I know where you're going. It sounds like we might want to table this so that folks can get a little more information related to it, and also potentially query some of the members of the pension committee themselves. I know we all have relationships with individual members on that pension committee, and then Mitch can certainly provide some historical perspective on what we have done and how it is impacted. Would you be in favor of tabling it at this point?
I would be, yes.
Can I?
Charles?
Go ahead. All right, I'll go first. I would be in favor of tabling it. To Susan's point, I was trying to figure out whether the pension committee was concerned about the financial impacts of the pandemic that we're going through now, or just in general. But I think Matt's comments that they had only received this report and frankly, in a few hours probably hadn't had the time to study and debate it. I think, between the situation that we're in with the pandemic, there's a couple of things that I noticed in my initial read of this. Even things like the school not contributing the entire contribution in recent years. I mean, things like that could be addressed, I think, too. So I would definitely want to table this. Frankly, I think the pension committee has done a great job, but we are in exceptional times right now. So I think understanding the full impact of these times is important. And I think tabling will allow us to not circumvent the 2-year cycle, but let's just extend the 2-year cycle by not making a decision at this time.
I'd agree. Is there, so you want to put that in the form of a motion to the table?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we table any decision to consider an act on the recommendation from the pension committee regarding the COLA for the current pensioners until, do we pick a date?
Until we're comfortable having that discussion.
Okay, until we're comfortable having that discussion.
Charles, is there a second on that?
Yes, I'll second that. And yeah, I don't want to put a time limit on it, but I did want to check with Mitch that us doing this will not affect that 2-year cycle in some of those bargaining agreements.
It shouldn't. I don't believe you're still being looking at it every 2 years. I'll just need to know what information you want from me. Obviously, you want to discuss with members of the pension committee their thoughts. If there's other information you need from me, Matt mentioned historical. I think I can look at that. But certainly, if there's other information you want from me, please contact me. Either by email or during this meeting, whatever, so I know what I'm looking for. Otherwise, I'll leave it to you, and Matt will let me know when you want to put this back on the table.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mitch.
I mean, I think the pension committee has to look at this, but they are dealing with the recommendation from Millman too. So I think we need a hard look at this, in Millman's calculations and in the situation that we find ourselves right now.
Good.
Okay, and if for any reason you want, I don't know if you do or feel the need to, our actuary would be, I'm sure, willing to attend via Zoom, at least in this near future, your meeting if you feel there's questions you have of her as the actuary as opposed to from me. It's whatever you need to know.
I'm going to propose a couple of things before we move on this vote. A couple of things. One, I would recommend that we hold a joint meeting with the pension committee to work through these questions, these issues and positions and get a better understanding and feel for where the pension committee is, not just related to the financial impact, but to the overall nature of COLAs and the impact on various pension plans. I also want to clarify something, Charles. I may have misspoke about the timing on the document. I was referring to the market analysis on our portfolio that they had received only hours before. They had this. They had the Milliman document in plenty of time to digest it prior to their meeting. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Oh, okay. That's good. I'm glad you did point that out because I did misunderstand.
Yeah. No, I misspoke, I'm sure.
But frankly, the effects of what we're going through right now on our portfolio, we all hope it comes back, but that is a hope, not a certainty.
Exactly. The next is a question relative to timeline. This is April 20th. Our budget has been theoretically in the can with the board, recommended out by the Board of Finance on the 5th of March. This is backwards. You're looking at, if we were to approve this, we'd have a $108,000 hole in our contribution, our anticipated contribution to the pension line item, because we would theoretically start paying this benefit immediately. So you'd be a year away from having started to fund this appropriately, unless that is the actual mechanism that is anticipated in Millman's evaluations. Would this contribution have been slated to start July 1 of 2020 or July 1 of 2021? If the answer is
this contribution would be slated for July 1, 2021.
Okay, thank you.
The COLA increase would begin sooner than that. Right. The actual impact on our contribution to the fund would increase, not with the numbers we've already received. So the numbers we've already received for the budgetary purposes for this year would not change.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So this is Lou. So the piece of information I kind of would be most interested in, and this may end up on Mary Jane's desk, is it strikes me as interesting that the last time a pension COLA was voted in was 2008. And I'm sort of curious how long it took to get the pension funding levels back to the pre-COLA award levels. In other words, they made the decision, they increased their obligation, you know, just to use sort of round numbers, if everything was at 90%, was there a dip and how long did it take to come out of the dip? So I guess I'm sort of curious what the 2007 through 2010 contribution levels look like.
Lou, that's a difficult question to answer because we had the market crash in 2009 in the middle of that.
Yeah, that's my point. We're looking at the similar problem.
Right.
Right, so we're changing two variables at once.
Right. Exactly.
I can certainly put some of those numbers together for you to look at and take them for whatever they're worth.
Right, understand the point. Yep, thank you.
All right, any further questions or discussion on the topic? Hearing none, I'm going to move the question. Selectman Federici.
In favor of
Table. This is a motion to table.
Aye.
Selectman Haverda.
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner.
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff.
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 8, Town Engineer Janice Plasiak. 8.1, discussion and possible action on the replacement of Noble Pedestrian Bridge. As you folks may be familiar, the Noble Pedestrian Bridge is in Sachem's Head, and it was shut down several months ago owing to the condition of the bridge, which has been deemed to be less than safe for consistent use on that. So, Janice, you want to take it over from here?
Sure. So if you recall, as part of my capital budget presentation, I had included this item for funding because it was brought to my attention last summer. I think it was like early summer that there was some concerns about the condition of the bridge. Went out and did an inspection with the help of the Sachem's Head Association by boat to get underneath the bridge. And there was some section loss on the bridge, but it seemed to be holding up. You know, we knew something needed to be done, but it didn't seem like it needed to be closed at the time or a safety issue to close the bridge. By the end of summer, I was alerted to the fact that it seemed to be getting worse. So I did hire an on-call structural engineer for the town, Michael Horton Associates, to go out with me to take a look at the condition of the bridge at that time. And from my prior experience, it had significantly deteriorated over a couple months' time. And based on their inspection, they recommended we close the bridge due to safety concerns. This bridge was installed as a pedestrian bridge only. It's about 6 feet wide for a walking surface. It replaced a prior vehicle bridge that was privately owned and then deeded to the town years ago. I don't recall exactly when. And then it was unsafe. It was looked at to be replaced as a vehicle bridge and then decided to be replaced instead for just a pedestrian bridge. It was installed in 1983, and it was installed using a pre-manufactured bridge with utilizing the existing abutments for the old vehicle bridge that were then adjusted to accept the new pedestrian bridge. So as I had explained in my presentation for the capital budget, the overall budget for this project would be $200,000. I approached the prior, the manufacturer of the existing bridge is actually still in business under a new name. So I contacted them for a quote. And that was presented in your packet today, since we're considering a bid waiver to purchase the replacement bridge as part of your action today. The quoted price was $122,000. We also met with the Sachem's Head Association. They had recommended we look at a fiberglass bridge since they had used something similar for one of the bridges that goes to the yacht club. And in doing so, I included that in my budget analysis. You could see the option 3, which is a fiberglass bridge. The purchase of that bridge is $165,800, and that also would require some change to the abutments because it's not a cambered bridge. So we would have to make some elevation adjustments to the piers, which would be less which would be costly and mean we wouldn't be able to reutilize the abutments as they are, as we can with this replacement I'm asking for you to approve today. We have inspected the abutments, the existing abutments that are there now, along with the structural engineer, and it's both our findings that they are reusable with some minor repointing of the center pier at the base. Other than that, the tops of the piers and abutments are in good condition. So that would be part of the scope of work for construction, is to repoint the pier base. So if you recall, during my presentation during the capital budget process, the history of the bridge when it was turned into just a pedestrian bridge, that the Sachem's Head Association had agreed and did proceed to provide 50% match reimbursement to the town for the costs for the replacement of the bridge. We have a document from 1983 and some Board of Selectmen minutes that we reviewed that showed that there was this cost sharing back then. And it was meetings with the Sachem's Head Association leadership took place this year, both on October 29th and February 10th, to discuss cost sharing for this project as well. So there was some consideration by the president of the association about what they were cost sharing. It was my understanding it would be the total project cost as it was in the past. There was some thought of just sharing the cost of the purchase of the bridge only. So that's something I think the Board of Selectmen would have to weigh in on, as to, you know, making the final decision as to what the sharing of this project cost might be with the Sachem's Head Association. But in order to move the project forward, the finance department did, I think, find some funding that was still available from this fiscal year. And Mary Jane, you could correct me with any of this because I'm not exactly sure. So the funds were actually made available ahead of the July 1, new budget going into effect. So they're available now as capital funds to expend. So I have been moving forward with, as I said, the structural engineering aspects. Our structural engineer is coordinating with the bridge supplier to spec out the performance of the bridge, as well as any details that need to be addressed. Those haven't been finalized yet. So in my request, you can see I'm asking for a bit of a contingency to be added to their quoted price until we get that all worked out. I don't know the final exact cost of the bridge. So I've asked for a price not to exceed $127,000 for the actual purchase of the structure. And then as you look at my my breakdown of the budget for the project, there's other costs involved in the project. Clearly, we have to demolish and remove the existing structure. And then we have to install the new bridge, and all that can't take place until we get permitting approved through Connecticut Deep. And we may need to do some survey work for fine detailing of how it's to be installed, as-built for our permitting, as well as materials testing during the construction to be sure. It comes in sections, so it has to be put together with bolts, and many times you have to have torque tests done to make sure the bolts are properly tightened to make sure that the bridge will be safe once it's installed.
This is May. I just wanted to input.
Yes, Pam.
Hi, Pam Millman, in-house counsel. I just given some background, did a little research about, historically how the town has dealt with something like this in Sachem's Head because of their unique structure in Sachem's Head. And as Janice said, historically, like in '83, it was the costs were shared. There's in '75, the bridge was discussed at the Board of Finance level, and it was stated at the Board of Finance level the town's not legally responsible for repair. I think there was a lot of pushback you could see from the minutes in that '83 range, and the resolution was to split the cost. There were Board of Finance minutes from 1970 where there was a discussion about the North Madison Road Bridge and the Noble Bridge, and those costs were reviewed. And Selectman Bullard stated that it was his opinion that the Board of Selectmen that the money could be better spent to benefit a greater number of townspeople on road drainage projects. So there's a sensitivity that you can see throughout the minutes. The only other thing I would add is, you know, if you look at like the Statesman's Head bylaws, Article 4, there's standing committees, there's a Public Works Committee, to whom shall be referred all matters relating to construction and use of roads, curbs, sidewalks, and shall have charge of construction and care of bridges, piers, seawalls, wharfs, parks, and other structures for public use. That's a quote from the Sachem's Head bylaws. And there's a quote from the Sachem's Head Charter. Section 2, the object of the Sachem's Head Association shall be to provide for the improvement of the lands in said district and for the health, comfort, protection, and convenience of persons living therein. And then the last quote I'll give you is Section 10 from their charter. Quote, the executive board shall have control of all sidewalks, crosswalks, and footpaths in the streets of said association, and may order the owner or owners of any land fronting on any highway within the limits of said association to construct or repair sidewalks, curbs, or gutters within the highway adjacent to such land. That's just to give you kind of the push and pull between the Sachem's Head unique situation and the rest of the town as you consider how to approach this. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, for sharing that information. The reality of Sachem's Head actually having their own public works organization, construction teams, et cetera, is I think challenging. That charter and bylaws are written in a different era and timeline. And I think the previous administrations who arrived at what would clearly be a partnership agreement when the Noble Bridge was first constructed in the first place recognizes the fact that that is a challenge for any association at any time. So the town took a position, obviously, that they'd had some shared responsibility with the Sachem's Head Association to continue to provide access in that methodology, since there's only one way in, one way out on into that particular area. And we actually have already allocated some funds to study the capability or study the opportunities to elevate some roadways there, which would create safer passage during storms, severe high tides, as well as storms. So we're making some investment in that area as well. I'm very comfortable with making the investment here with the Sachem's Head Association. That's a girls' prep school in Hamden, I think. And again, we've had Mary Alice Lee, who I know is on this call, who's the president of the association, and others have been gracious in meeting with us and showing a willingness to share. There has been a little bit of a rub relative to a full 50% of the project cost versus 50% of the bridge costs. We've been gone back and forth on that, but thank you both for having clarified that the 50% of the previous project was for the entirety of the project, not just the cost of the bridge itself. I'm recommending that we approve this. Now, as I said, there are some. There is a little bit of I wouldn't say tension, but a little bit of discussion relative to the contribution level from the association. And I would like to move this forward and ask the board's indulgence for me to continue to negotiate with the association relative to their contribution level, not to be less than 50% of the steel bridge, but certainly with an expectation that they also pick up an additional share of the cost to construct the bridge in and of itself, making it consistent with the previous arrangement the town had with the association.
Is that a motion that you made, Matt?
Probably easier that way, right?
Because
Yes,
I'll
it is.
second it.
All right. Now, discussion, comments, questions?
Can I
have
just,
a- Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I just want to make one clarification. All those other numbers on that, on that sheet are all estimates. Obviously, we're going to have to get either proposals from construction companies or put this out to bid for the actual construction costs. So I'm hoping to be the high bidder on that, but when you put together a budget, the numbers will be what the numbers are once we get the actual proposals in.
We know budgeting's an art, not a science.
On that point, Pam, I noticed in the bridge as proposed that there is no shipping and assembly in there, which, in the fiberglass bridge is $8,000. If it's anywhere near that, we're going to go over the $200,000 here. So, Matt, maybe you can expand on. You said 50%, but is it 50% of the 200,000 or?
Just happened.
Well, the option one is 187, but again, Janice has just suggested that number is an estimate, not a hard number. I'd be looking to negotiate towards 50% of the total cost, consistent with the agreement that was reached in the 70s with the association.
Now, what happens if it goes over the 200,000?
It's 50% of the total cost. It would be the position that we're taking.
Okay, so
we're being asked today to only approve the purchase of the bridge, correct, Pam? I mean, Janice?
Yes, yeah, I'm asking for the bid waiver so that we could proceed with the purchase of the actual bridge. There's other components in terms of bidding out or getting proposals for the demolition and construction costs, separate from this item.
Yeah, we got to go back to that philosophical question we've addressed in so many other issues. This bridge is closed now, so what option do the people have? How do they get there now without the bridge?
They would have to walk around from along Falcon Road to Prospect to Chimney Corners. So it's a walk around situation as opposed to being able to park north of the bridge on Colonial Road, or I believe the Sachem's Yacht Club also directs people to park on Uncas Point Road, and then they utilize the bridge to, as a shorter walking path with a sidewalk. There are not necessarily sidewalks on the frontage of Falcon Road in the area where parking is able to occur, and then people have to walk.
When was this bridge closed?
It was closed September of 2019.
Oh, okay. So they have not experienced the summer with the bridge closed at this point in time.
That's correct. Yes.
Correct. Before I go to Mary Alice Lee, who's raising her hand literally here, I think we need to acknowledge that there is an overall public interest related to safety here, because there are times where access into a certain portion of that neighborhood is prohibited or limited during storms and or severe tides, and folks getting in and out. So this creates, even though it's not going to allow for vehicles, but it would create a pathway for emergency service personnel and or residents to get in or out of that that area. So Tracy, I'm going to ask you to unmute SHA Zoom.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Mary Alice.
I'm Mary Alice Lee. I'm currently the president of the Sachem's Head Association. And I just wanted to say what Matt just mentioned. We consider this a safety issue for the neighborhood. There's 11 households on Chimney Corner Circle. And those households have one infant, one toddler, a number of elderly people, including one disabled person. There are that intersection there between Prospect and Chimney Corner is flooded at the time of extreme high tides, and it's flooded when we have severe storms like we did last week, last Monday, I believe. those are unplanned, unnamed events that limit access out for people who are in the Chimney Corner Circle area. So we consider this a safety issue. Since I'm unmuted, I just want to also say that this bridge is used by everybody in town. We have walkers, cyclists, runners from all over town who use this bridge all the time for their own recreation. And it also is used by the Sea Leg Shuffle race group, where they raise money for the Guilford Child Care Center. So it's not something that we control access to at all. It's a town benefit, and it's a public way in town that the town benefits from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Any other questions or comments?
I had a question. Where is the closest parking on, I guess you'd say, the north side of the bridge?
It's just north of the bridge. There's parking along the edge of the road.
Public parking.
I don't know if it's controlled by the Sachem Head Association or if it's public parking.
I can answer that.
Mary Alice?
There is parking available on the lower part of Colonial Road just before the bridge. We put lines in to designate where the parking would be problematic for the residents, but there are a number of spaces along Colonial Road. There's a couple of spaces on Chimney Corner Circle, maybe 10 or so, and some on Prospect Avenue. But all of these are useless to the Chimney Corner Circle residents when there's flooding at the far end of the bridge where Chimney Corner Circle meets Prospect Avenue.
Is that public parking, Mary Alice, or is it restricted by sticker or anything?
No, it's entirely public parking.
If I can ask, has the Sachem's Head Association agreed to fund 50% of the project at this point, or are you still, are the members still deciding, or where does that stand?
Well, we were under the mistaken impression, based on talking to the treasurer from 1983, that the association had funded half of the bridge. So for us to look now at the cost of half of the entire project has been a wake-up call to the financial obligation that we may have to keep this open for our neighborhood and for the town. We're just working on our budget now for FY21. Our entire budget for the neighborhood is $150,000. So as you can imagine, we can't make a $100,000 contribution in any single year. And the first selectman has offered to negotiate with us to make these payments over time. That is the only way we can do this without a doubling of our mill rate, and higher than a doubling of our mill rate for people who are already paying taxes to the town of Guilford as well. So it's a challenge for us. We believe it's a quality of life issue as well as a safety issue for Sachem's Head, but for the entire town. And so we are willing to step up and partner with the town on this.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Janice.
One other thing, just directly to the point of the structure itself. Interestingly enough, I mean, the structure was installed, 36 years ago before it failed. It typically comes with a 10-year warranty, so we got a good, useful life out of it. We're hopeful that'll be experience going forward, but as you know, things don't seem to be made the way they used to be, but it is the same construction, same bridge, and we're hopeful that it will be a long-term solution going forward, but it does only come with a 10-year warranty.
Got it. Thank you, Janice. Anything further on this topic? We have a motion on the table, and call the question. Selectman Federici.
Aye.
Selectman Haverda.
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner.
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff.
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mary Alice.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9, discuss and take possible action on tax deferment program and/or low interest rate program as outlined by Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7S, Section 6. For those of you who have not had the opportunity or the opportunity to look at that order, there are 2 provisions in that order that municipalities are required to assess and report back to the governor's office or the Office of Public OPM rather, relative to 2 programs. The first of which is a deferment program, a tax deferment program by 90 days, whereby there are no penalties associated with late payment. You have up to 90 days to make your tax payment. So taxes would be due October 1 as opposed to July 1, and no interest would accrue. There are some options related to that, and that is requiring those who would like to take advantage of that deferment to file an application, to put an application together, and there is some criteria associated with that. That is not mandatory. Towns have the option and the ability to waive that application process. That application process could be quite unwieldy and might actually result in someone or group of people having to make some very subjective decisions relative to who does and who does not qualify. So my recommendation, let me cover the second one. The other is a low interest rate program, which in effect takes the penalty for late payment of taxes from an 18% per year down to a 3% per year. However, it is only for those who have overdue tax bills and have already started to accumulate interest payments because they are in arrears. So this only applies to the period between March 10th, 2020, including through to July 1, 2020. So that would have been for previous tax payments due most recently in January, on January 1. There may actually be some there from the previous July 2019 tax bill. So it only reduces the rate for those 3.5 months, or a little over 3.5 months. So those are the 2 plans that have been made available. Municipalities have the opportunity to do one, both, or none. It is my recommendation to this board for consideration that we implement a deferment program for pretty obvious reasons. There are people in our community who are going to be, and have been dramatically impacted by this crisis. Suffice to say, there is also a significant portion of our community who has not been impacted by this. If we were to take the national numbers on unemployment, that are projected national numbers on unemployment, somewhere around 15% at this point is the number people are talking about. So, if you were to apply that to our town, that would have a significant impact on people's ability to potentially make their tax payments. There are some financial ramifications to this as well, particularly as it relates to cash flow and our financial position. However, it would be my expectation that because there are a significant number of our residents that will be able to and willing to protect the ability of those less fortunate to take advantage of the extension, that folks would pay their tax bills on time if they had the wherewithal, the means to do it. It's not a get out of jail free card for 90 days. And the interest you're going to earn on that at the current rates in the bank is not worth the effort in my mind's eye. So I'm recommending that we move the tax deferment into place and adopt that as a policy. I am not in favor of moving the interest rate because that applies to folks who already had tax payments due. Yes, they might be further impacted by this, but those are obligations that were due prior to the onset of this crisis. So that is kind of my philosophy and my thinking. There's probably some questions around, can we afford this? Let's say, for instance, everybody decided to take advantage of this deferment. Well, we have on July 1st or 2nd, we traditionally get escrow payments from the banks. For those of you who've had their taxes escrowed, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Your bank pays your tax bill. You don't have to come to the town hall or mail in a tax bill. It's done electronically by banks. Our most recent estimate, Mary Jane, is $15 to $16 million. Last year came in on July 1 or July 2nd in escrow payments. We have an unallocated, unassigned fund balance of $10.5 million. We've got allocated fund balance of a couple million more. So we've got what, $12, $13 million in a cash position today. So on July 2nd, July 2nd, we may have $25 to $30 million on hand, which would clearly cover us in terms of our expenses with some modifications. We would probably forego making our pension contribution immediately. There are also some other opportunities to move out. But on the other hand, our expenses haven't ramped up to the full, 1/12 at that point. In July and August, the schools aren't in session. So the 2/3 of our budget expenditure is, I would say, it's not idle, but it is in slow motion. So I think we have the wherewithal to withstand any financial challenges. The next question that comes to mind is, well, we're going to lose out on all that interest income. No, we aren't. The money's all going to get here at some point. We lose out on it maybe early in the process, but it will all eventually be here at some point. So I'll get off my soapbox now and open it up to discussion or comments from the balance of the board members.
Was that a motion, Matt?
Yeah. Yes, Charles.
I'll second it.
The voice of reason strikes again.
So just so that I can clarify and understand, you're recommending the deferral of the payments, but not the change in the interest rate for the outstanding balances.
Correct.
Okay.
So they're one of the
I'd be
two
very
options.
interested to know percentages, the percentage of people that take advantage of this, percentage of our town. Now, I understand that's not going to crystallize until July, maybe August.
Right.
Pam's waving.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to know any names, but I'd like to know what percentage of people take advantage of it.
Yes, and we can certainly do that back end analysis. It's quite honestly, Lou, just think of the reaction that this community has had, the giving nature, the volunteerism.
Right.
The Guilford Foundation put out a plea to try to put temporary funding in people's pockets, and they thought they would need $20,000. As of the end of last week, I think the number is up to over $120,000 or close to $120,000 in contributions that have come in from folks within the community to help others. So, Pam.
Yes, Pam Millman, in-house counsel. I just want to point out two aspects of the law of the executive order. One is that in order, I'm going to read. It's just eligibility of landlords. There's a section which applies to the deferment program that in order for a landlord or any taxpayer that rents or leases to any commercial, residential, or institutional tenant or lessee to be eligible for the deferment program, said landlord must provide documentation to the town that the parcel has or will suffer a significant income decline or that commensurate forbearance was offered to their tenants or lessees. So there is a burden on the landlords, and they can only take advantage of this program if they have given a like benefit to their tenants, a forbearance. So I just wanted to point that out. And the only other thing I wanted to point out was with respect to the bank escrows, there's language in the EO that basically if the mortgagee, if the resident is in default of their mortgage, and the bank otherwise has rights to those escrow payments, the bank doesn't necessarily have to forward those escrow payments to the municipality. So when you factor in your numbers, that's just one other element of that. That's it.
To Lou's point, I really want to see the numbers, but that's going to be after the effect. I want to have the optimism that Matt has regarding people taking advantage of the situation. I'm not 100% sure that we really appreciate the financial significance of the impact that this pandemic is going to have. So, in hindsight, we'll figure it out and we'll be able to address the percentages. I think Matt's explanation of whether the town is in a position to weather it, worst case scenario, I'm comfortable with, and that's why I seconded this. I think it's something we have to do, and hopefully it won't be any worse than, then we'll work through it. And we'll only know this in 6 months or a year.
Mary Jane.
I'm ready to vote.
I'd just like to ask a clarification of Pam. I know that the landlord application portion is on the application if we were to request that of everyone. But if we do the deferral for everyone instead of anyone negatively impacted, would the landlords still be able to take advantage of this?
Good question.
Pam needs to be unmuted.
She's waving.
We're getting there.
Trace.
Okay.
There you go, Pam.
Got it.
You're good.
There you go. That particular question was asked among the municipality lawyers, and the outcome of all discussions on that was the landlord eligibility requirements. You still must abide. The landlords are still held to those eligibility requirements, even if you open up the program to all residents.
Thank you, Pam.
Yep.
So that would necessitate us putting the questionnaire or the utilizing the application that was supplied by OPM.
Yeah, I'd have to see. I'd have to see the exact documentation you're referring to before I definitively give you an answer on that. But
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think Matt is referring to the forms that we received through the Tax Collectors Association, which is the deferral program, the application for the deferral for everyone. And in the middle, it says, oh, and if you're a landlord, you must do A, B, and C.
Yes,
I had been under the assumption that all was all. So that's why I was looking for that clarification.
But what they did say is it's to ease the burden of the municipality is, I'm going from memory now, but you could have a landlord affidavit, like a certification, as opposed to all this backup documentation from them. And then, you would have an audit right if you didn't believe what you were receiving was accurate. So they're trying to make it, I guess, as easy as possible for the municipalities by saying, have the landlord complete an affidavit certifying certain issues.
Pam, would the town have the option of just allowing landlords to take the deferral program without having them apply? I don't know if that's what we would want. I'm just asking the question.
My understanding is you don't have the option of allowing the landlords to take part in the deferment if they can't, if they don't qualify under that eligibility of landlord requirements set forth in the EO. So they've got to show, that they've suffered significant income decline. And my understanding is they can do that by virtue of an affidavit. It's not like they have to send in their financials to the town. Right.
Yeah, I think that protection is there just to protect communities like ours against landlords not having a negative impact, but just taking advantage of the 90 days to not pay their taxes.
And they were agreed. And I think they were really trying to help those tenants.
Right,
It was making an incentive for those landlords to help their tenants.
right. Good
Thank
point.
you. Thank you, Pam.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions? No? All right, call the question. Selectman Federici,
Aye.
Selectman Haverda,
He's muted at the moment.
Charles, you're muted. You're raising your hand in agreement, I understand. Charles, you're unmuted.
Yes, I'm unmuted now, yes.
All right. Selectwoman Renner,
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff,
Aye. Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Motion carries. I think we've done the right thing here. Thank you very much for that.
Good.
Item 10, consider and take action to correct Board of Selectmen vote regarding setting the date for the final budget adoption by the Budget Making Authority, that being the Board of Finance pursuant to the Government Executive Order 7C. The reason for this, Pam, you just want to give me give us a quick rationale for why this is on the agenda when we thought we had settled it last month?
Yes. So if you remember from last month's, 2 weeks ago, our meeting, I needed to further research whether or not it was your authority, the Board of Selectmen authority, to set the budget vote date, or whether it was a recommendation to the budget making authority to set the date for the budget vote. And it was determined that it is within your authority to set that date and not simply a recommendation. So your minutes from 2 weeks ago was a recommendation to the Board of Finance to set the budget date, the vote date. And now what you're going to correct is you're setting the date as a body for them.
Okay.
So just so that I understand that means the Board of Finance, I don't know whether they would or wouldn't, but they can't change the date of May 5th because we, the Board of Selectmen, have the power to say that's the date?
Correct.
Right. So, but I want to go back to the conversations that precipitated us picking the 5th. And that was, there was the original discussion around extending by a full 30 days as opposed to just moving it to them. The original schedule, we had them actually setting the budget this evening at their regularly scheduled Board of Finance meeting. So the larger question is, are we still comfortable with the date of the 5th, knowing that we still have one more meeting of this board to extend it beyond the 5th. Now, the legal opinions we have, including one that Pam forwarded along to me earlier this morning, there is language, the governor gave us 30 days. 30 days from the time of our normal process. And the budget making authority must adopt the budget prior to the expiration of the 30 days. All right. So no later than the 21st of May. All right. We now have, not evidence, but we do have evidence of the current thinking in the administration. The schools are, the lockdown or the shutdown is now through May 20th, the full shutdown. There will no doubt be some discussions and possibly easing in certain segments of our business world and our society. However, the governor also moved the referendum date, the primary date, to August 11th. I think you're probably going to hear within this week that the State Department of Education is most likely going to shut the schools down for the balance of the year. So in either fashion, the possibility of things being lifted and life going back to normal and us being able to have town meetings and referendums and a reversal of the executive order unlikely to happen prior to the 20th, the 21st of May. So I'm still comfortable with the 5th, changing the language to say they shall set the budget by May 5th. We still have that leeway, give them by May 5th. If they want to do it tonight, they're certainly welcome to do it tonight. And then we would have our regularly scheduled meeting on the 4th of May to extend it beyond the 5th. Thoughts, et cetera?
This is Charles Haverda. I'm comfortable with the 5th. I was part of the discussion, needless to say. I think we are giving the citizens an opportunity. And in light of the Board of Finance meeting last week, I'm comfortable with the 5th. And to your point, Matt, God forbid this doesn't start smoothing out, on the 4th, we can make another decision.
Good.
I'll likewise. I see it the same way. There has actually been vigorous debate. There's been a lot of input. People are certainly aware of the issue, and anybody that wants to be heard can have an opportunity to be heard before the Board of Finance. And to the extent that we have that safety valve on the 4th, it makes it a little bit easier today to say that we should set the date for the 5th. So I'm on board with that as well.
Good.
I
You
feel
want me
the
to
same
move
way.
it, Matt, or go ahead, Susan?
I just said I feel the same. I agree.
Sue? Whoops, we just lost Sue. Trace, you didn't drop her out of the meeting, did you? She did it to herself.
Breaking up. I
She
can't
did it
hold
to
it.
herself. Let's give her a minute to come back on. What do you think?
Sure.
I think Tracy has to reinvite her. If Tracy sends her out of the meeting, she can't rejoin herself, I don't think.
Tracy didn't send her out, I don't think.
No.
You can always go click back. Even if that happens, somebody could
Then
click
she
back.
can click
into
back. If
Right.
if Susan leaves, she can come back in, but if Tracy, whichever.
So can you hear us?
Not
She
getting
has
any
technology consternation face.
audio? Normally would do under correspondence, but it's germane to this particular topic. So I'd like to, I'll wait until Sue gets back with us.
All right, I'm going to pause the recording.
Okay.
Okay.
We let the record reflect that Sue voted first before the motion, but we'll get back to her. We weren't going to do it without you. As I mentioned to the balance of the participants, I had been asked to read something into the record by correspondence, but it's germane to this topic, so I'm going to do it now. It's a letter from Jonathan Trotta. And it reads, Dear Board of Selectmen, I may be unable to attend the Board of Selectmen meeting on April 20th, 2020, and would like these comments to be included in public forum. Pam, I do have a question for you.
I'm here.
Pam, because these were not made an official part of the record, is it an issue for me to read these in at this point as input? It came. I received it last night at 11:02. Needless to say, I didn't receive it in real time.
Yeah, it's a tough call.
All right, I'm gonna beg the board's indulgence and move forward.
I think that's the right. I think that's the right approach, honestly.
Thank you. Item 1. Like Selectman, and Charles, you've been cited here. Like Selectman Haverda, I am in support of Selectman Renner's comments from the 4/6/2020 Board of Selectmen meeting. I too would like to utilize a 30-day extension allowed in accordance with EO 7C Section 5, such that the Board of Finance would have more time to consider public comment on the budget and have more time to determine the effect of the pandemic on the budget In addition, I would like more time so the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance can consider if there are safe alternatives like drive-through voting, which I suggested in the Board of Finance meeting on 4/13 that would allow Guilford to reschedule and conduct its budget referendum in accordance with the town charter. He quotes Board of Selectmen meetings from 4/6/2020. Ms. Renner said that she would like to utilize a 30-day extension to allow more time for the public to comment and give the Board of Finance more time to determine the effects of the pandemic on the budget. She has no problems with the process. She just thinks that they should allow more time. Mr. Haverda said he supported Ms. Renner's position, end quote from the minutes. Item 2, I believe that canceling the annual town meeting and the town budget referendum in accordance with Executive Order 7I, Section number 13, usurps voter rights. Other towns have chosen to conduct referendums and town meetings within the framework of the existing executive orders. I believe Guilford should do the same. I respectfully request that the Board of Selectmen reschedule the annual budget meeting and budget referendum by first consulting with local or state public health officials and then conducting such meeting and/or referendum in a way that significantly reduces the risk of transmission of COVID-19. Conducting in-person meetings, approval processes or referendums in this way aligns with the language of the last sentence of Executive Order 7S, Section 7, Section number 7. Vernon, Connecticut has conducted in-person meetings that require public voting using drive-through voting. I believe Guilford can conduct its annual budget meeting and budget referendum safely, as well as this technique or others which significantly reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19 and other dangerous contagions. Check out this brief video to see how Vernon, Connecticut was able to implement drive-up voting. Respectfully submitted, Jonathan Trotta, Guilford Board of Finance. As to his comment on drive-through voting in Vernon, is my understanding that anyone can and has the potential in Vernon to challenge that vote legally because it is contradictory to the executive order. But nonetheless, I just thought, since Jonathan took the time to write that last night for our deliberation, and I also, he's been, my understanding is he has been circulating in the community something very similar to this. He also, which I think is a matter of record for the Board of Finance meeting tonight, he wrote a letter directly to Governor Lamont to re-examine his executive order and quite honestly was challenging the executive order. I don't know that he's received a response from the governor's office on that issue. So I just thought you should have the benefit of the comments that he provided, particularly since two of you were quoted in the letter that he forwarded along to the board. So.
And I looked at the video that he included because we all, I think, received a copy of this letter.
Yeah.
And I believe it wasn't a town budget referendum. It sounded like a transfer of funds. So I don't even think that the comparison to Vernon is apples to apples.
Agreed.
As it relates to this overall topic and the matter that's on the table, which is, correcting this vote on setting the date, and in response to Mr. Trotta's comments previously at the Board of Finance, and now with this letter that he brought to our attention essentially this morning, I mean, it strikes me that if we are going to have a discussion as part of a larger debate to allow greater access for more people to vote more easily, I think that's a great thing. I'm glad to see Jonathan thinking along those lines, and assuming he's supporting that idea as a good idea, and he intends to stand behind that consistently in the future, I think that's a helpful process, and I'm happy to engage in that debate. But as a temporary expedient to sort of sidetrack this budget process, which has moved forward, I don't think it's helpful.
Thanks, Lou. Anyone else? Good. All right. The question on the table is to change the language to require the Board of Finance to set the budget by May 5th. So call the question. Selectman Federici.
Aye.
Selectman Haverda.
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner.
Aye.
Selectwoman Ruoff.
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Committee reports. I'm suspecting there's not much there, given what's been going on. Sandy, anything at all?
Well, I don't have an answer to this. I know that Patrick Quinn Associates, in the process of getting this affordable housing project through with the many, many details that need to be met, they were going to meet with the Historic District Committee. They hoped to meet with the Historic District Committee on April 13th, but it would have had to have been virtually, and I have not been able to confirm if that happened.
Okay, thank you. We'll await an update.
Yeah.
But I do understand they are moving, they're moving full speed ahead.
Yes,
On this, particularly because there are the regulatory requirements.
Right.
And our regulatory bodies are all open to assist them as well, so, good. Correspondence, anybody else have anything under correspondence? Old business? New business? Public forum? Jeff? Tracy, would you unmute Jeff Hocking, please?
All
Jeff,
right.
you're live.
Thank you very much. That was an interesting meeting to sit through.
Here's 2 hours of your life you won't get back.
There you go. But, you know, first of all, I think I can speak for all the pensioners and just want to thank you for tabling the matter for further review. I'm going to forward copies of my letters to both the pension board, excuse me, and the selectmen board to the town hall personnel for distribution to all of you. So you have that, you know, as part of your future discussion. I did, while we were having the meeting there, I did take a look at, I have some of the minutes from some of the last reviews, and I think it's interesting to note that of the 5 people sitting on the 2020 pension board, only one of them was on the 2018 pension board. Only one of them, which is actually a different person, was on the 2016 board, and none of them were on the 2014 board. So I just think it speaks to kind of a lack of continuity and history when they're looking at these things. And lastly, our group of pensioners has, based on a quick tally I did in the last few minutes, years of service of probably over 800 years of service with the Guilford Police Department. So we have a lot of previous administrators, union presidents. We have one past chief in that group who I think can provide accurate information and insight, you know, for you as far as the history and just to help you make a decision. And I would ask that we be included as a part of the future discussions on this matter. And I just want to thank you again for allowing me to speak today. And everybody,
You're welcome, Jeff. Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion.
Second.
Call the question. All in favor? We're doing this one as a voice vote. Aye.
Aye.
Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Well done.
Thanks, Tracy.